Hello and welcome to Write On, the podcast from Final Draft. This is the show where we talk about all things screenwriting. I'm your host, Phil Galasso. Today we have an interview with Ali Schouten, executive producer and showrunner of the new revival of the hit show iCarly.
Ready in 5. I'm Carly. 4. 3. Spaghetti taco. 2.
iCarly is going to be taking a break.
Welcome to the new iCarly.
We'll help however we can.
I'm really glad to hear you say that.
Damn it!
Here we go!
People are weirdly loving this.
I don't think this is how you do it!
This is your moment to shine. You need to be a trailblazer.
Like an effortless trailblazer. Like I just got out of bed and was all, oops, I just blazed a trail.
Hot wings, hot Cheetos, hot pretzels, and hot beers. Oh. That's the last time I listened to Guy Fieri.
I am in no place to date.
Freddie! I put your warm milk in your thermos next to your bed.
So are we done here? This is not how I imagined my life. Carly!
Maybe you just need some arm candy of your own. And I have the perfect guy.
Yeah, we're done. Do you think you could shoot me using that filter that makes my cheekbones all...
Like an alien?
a sexy alien?
Ali and guest host Sharday Sellers discussed inclusivity being at the forefront of the show, incorporating new characters in with the existing ones, how Ali built out the writer's room, and more. Check it out.
Okay, so I'm here with Ali. You're in one part of the world. I'm in the other part of the world. We're here together today. So thank you for being here and doing this because you're off currently, right?
Yes, thank you for having me. I am on a short break.
When do we go back?
In a week or two, something like that.
Okay, awesome.
We're figuring it all out, but yeah, we get to get back in there soon, which I'm really excited about.
I want to jump right into this because I have so many questions and I don't want to forget any. So first of all, I told you before we started, I had a little story. It's not a little story. It's more so of like 5 Degrees of Kevin Bacon type thing.
Oh my gosh, exciting.
So you have a director who has shot 2 episodes for iCarly, who was the director on my first feature film that I ever wrote. And her name is Monica Jolia.
Oh my gosh, yes. Her second episode just dropped today.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my gosh, we love her. Yes.
I haven't told her we're doing this podcast. I'll tell her later. But when I saw Monica, was on her Instagram shooting episodes for iCarly. I was like, and then I got the call to do this interview. I was like, what? The world is so small.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's great. And she also did an episode of Diary of a Future President, which I wrote on. And I wasn't on set for that. So we hadn't met, but I had heard all these wonderful things about her and was like, we have to get her for iCarly because Alana, who created Diary, Alana Pena, was saying all these wonderful things. So yes, it really is a small world. It's
really a small world. And then it got me into this rabbit hole of, I was looking at all the directors who so far have shot on iCarly. And I mean, the first of all, the talented names, but the diversity among them. And there's women, there's men, all shades and creeds and colors. And I just wanted to know for you as the, showrunner, how is that important into your process? Because iCarly is it's the show for Gen Z and where we are in the world right now. It's very reflective of the time we're living in, as it was when it first premiered. So I wanted to know during the interview process for directors, was that always on your mind? Was that something you and the network had always discussed about being a priority?
Yeah, I mean, it's a priority all across the board, not just directors, not just writers, not just cast, everybody. We really want to be inclusive. I feel like one thing about iCarly was that inclusivity was always at the forefront of the show. You could submit things and have them played on Nickelodeon, and that was, your hidden talents and everything. And it was all about including the audience. And I think for us this time around, we wanted that to be reflected in the cast, the crew, the writer's room. So yeah, it was just something where I won't say I hugely went out of my way. I mean, I was really excited about Mornike, and I'd worked with Phil Lewis and Anthony Rich before. I hadn't worked with Gene Segal, and I hadn't gotten to work with Nathan as a director, but we just really went with people who were excited about the show, and it meant something to a lot of them, and had experience with it. But yeah, from the beginning, I just made it clear, like, this is really important that we reflect the world we live in, and the world that these characters live in, which is, a modern major city, and they're 27, and like, they're going to have a whole range of friends. And we want to make sure that that's authentic in the writer's room and in every department.
Oh, and speaking of authenticity, I'm going to catch the listeners up because you know all of this, but just in case the listeners don't. So what I read was that it was Miranda who was approached to do a reboot of iCarly. And she said, yes, but only if we can target adults and if we can make it to what it is now. Okay. So jumping into the writer's room, skipping ahead, this is very interesting to me because normally on a show, you're writing the voice for the characters as a writer's group. But this one, the characters already have a voice, but it was a younger voice.
Right.
So how do you attack that? Like, we need to write in Carly's voice, but it's now a different Carly. It's the same Carly, but yet it's a more mature Carly. So how do you tackle that on day one?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say like we jumped in and had it nailed perfectly. That was not the case. It was it was a lot of conversations. Miranda's been really generous as a producer. She was in the room a lot, especially at the beginning. And so she was able to weigh in. Like, we had days where we just focused on what would her character be now, and really got into that. And sometimes we would go down a road in a storyline that we'd ultimately feel like was too kids show, that didn't really feel authentic. That at the same time, she's a big kid, this character is all about having fun and being spontaneous. And it just felt inauthentic to not have her go on a lot of kooky adventures. So it was really a balancing act with that. And I will say it was a lot of fun. I mean, you're playing in a sandbox that is just so great. You have these beloved characters and then also, new ones that we got to invent. And I also think when you have such a talented group of actors like we do, writing toward their skills is a blast. Like, by a few episodes in, we could hear all of their voices, the adult versions of the characters who were on the show previously, and then also the new characters. I think, Jaden Triplett, who plays Millicent, has this great, like, sweet, sarcastic thing she does that wasn't originally part of the character, but we just tried to write toward that more and more because she's so funny when she does it.
And then and in that same vein, not only are you writing for their new mature voices, you're also writing for an audience who may have seen the show but have grown up, but also may have not seen the show ever.
Right.
So what's the balance in finding there? Like, we have to catch everyone with information, but not so much so that it becomes repetitive for the people who are coming back 20 years later to watch it.
Yeah. And I mean, in that case, we were lucky in that we had a range of writers, some of whom grew up on it, some of whom watched it with their kids who grew up on it, some of whom were less familiar with it. And so could kind of be the like, wait, I don't know if everybody's going to get that voice in the room. And so by having a range in the room, we could kind of stay on. The process that we had for every story was, what makes this a great, authentic story? Often it would be someone in the writer's room or Miranda's life experience we were drawing from. And then what makes this only an iCarly story, the iCarly weird. And that could be a character from the original series, or that could be something having to do with the web show, or that could be just something super strange. I think when this, when this airs, we will have seen episode 12, which is a classic sitcom, dinner party that's a disaster episode. But each thing in it is very specific to our characters. And there's something that we have in there that is sort of a nod to like TikTok food trends, but also it's like a giant raviolo that's like the turducken of pastas. It's filled with different pastas. And the way it's done is it pulsates. And I felt like that was that weird kind of nod to the kids show wackiness that you wouldn't necessarily do on, Big Bang Theory or something. And at the same time, it is kind of that classic sitcom story that we love to watch.
So iCarly is streaming on Paramount, whereas opposed to where it was on Nickelodeon years ago. Right. And then what is it like writing this like adult focused, but still sitcom heavy show for a streamer? And are the notes different than it would have been on a typical network show like a Nickelodeon?
Yes, I actually think so. Nickelodeon is our studio. And I feel like I like to think of us as the favorite child because we let them be bad. I don't know if this is true. This might be the opposite of true, but because they really push us to be edgy and to put the characters in situations that they wouldn't be in on Nickelodeon. So it's great. They've been awesome partners in that because we just want to tell weird, but true to life in terms of the experience. Even if there's a robot wedding, that's all about going to your enemy's wedding and how that makes you feel and the grounded emotions of that. So they've been really cool about like there's sometimes that we'll put jokes in and then we'll be like, that's too much. Let's take it out. And they're like, where's that? Where's that filthy joke you made? So
and that's great. I think that's what and that was really sad. I think about this Lizzie McGuire reboot that fell apart is that's what that showrunner really was pushing for. And that's what Hillary was pushing for. It's like, Lizzie is not 15 anymore. She's 32, 33. She's probably got a kid. Maybe she's married and they just couldn't work it out that way. So I love that they're receptive and they're pushing it to be a little bit more. Cause I think also the audiences are just so much smarter. Gen Z is such a smart audience.
It's terrifying. Yes. No, that's so true. And, you can't try to pander. You can't write down to, even with kids, like you can't write, they'll smell it from a mile away. And so for us, it was like, does it make us laugh? Does it feel true to the show? I mean, we tried not to overthink it. We all kind of became iCarly scholars of the original, especially as the season went on, but it just really, it had to be something that we would enjoy watching because we felt like that would translate overall. And pushing the envelope just to push the envelope, like doesn't really get you a lot story and character wise, but saying, okay, what would be the thing that these characters would do as adults? Like they might hook up with that person. They might go to this party. They might tell this lie that gets them in trouble. Like, whatever the true to life thing was. And then just, make it strange.
No, yeah, I love that you said that because I do. It goes both ways. When you try to push too much cheesiness and you try to push too much like controversy. You're like, oh, they really are trying really hard over here,
right?
So that's why I like the show too because it's a good balance. Now, this is a writing focused podcast, so I have to ask some of these writing questions, or they'll write into me and basically.
Fine.
So let's start about the ethos and the ecosystem of your writer's room and putting it together. You mentioned earlier some people had watched the show when they were younger, some people watched it when they were kids. So how it seems so daunting to me. I'm not a showrunner, but sitting down to think of your process of just starting the hire, like where do you start? It seems like so many different avenues. Like I could start here or I could go here.
So this was my first time show running and I wanted to be incredibly thorough. So I read at least the first 5 pages of every single script that was submitted. And whether that was through an agent to the studio or that was, someone tweeting, hey, I've read some good scripts lately. I'd be like, I want to read them, and so I read the initial portion of everybody's script to see if there was something there. I know, for a lot of people, it's about the specificity of can they write for my show? For me, it was a little bit more, can they write? I can teach you to double space the dialogue, make it multicam. And if you're funny or heartfelt or just interesting and have weird ideas, like some of the writers that we met a lot of writers and some of the writers that we met with, I just love the concept of their script. And I felt like they could bring that weirdness that we were going to want. So it really depends. And I think we were really lucky. We had people who had a lot of like classic multicam experience. And then we had authors and we had people who it was their first room. And we had, we had multiple people who were also in SAG. So, we had some very fun read throughs of scenes and everything. Yeah. So just trying to get diversity in terms of experience as well as diversity in terms of all other elements as well.
And then for your writer's room, was this pre-pandemic? Was this during pandemic?
This was a fully pandemic show. This was the very first time I talked to the studio about this project was the very first meeting that I changed into a phone call because of COVID. It was March 11th or 12th. And a year after that, we had our first or second table read. That's why I remember that date specifically. So we did this fast. We did this really fast in the pandemic. Zoom room. Luckily, people were able to come to set and produce their episodes because people were getting vaccinated and seemed like there was a light at the end of the tunnel at that moment. Yeah. So yeah, it was a fully pandemic show, which is really hard, but also meant that people could be sick and still come in when they could, or they could be remote, drive out to a cabin with Wi-Fi. And, I think that's opened up opportunities for people who are in different places to get these jobs. You don't have to like pick up everything and be able to afford to move to another city. So I hope that a little bit of the Zoom room element will stay after the pandemic.
Yes. 19-year-old me who packed up her stuff from Michigan would have loved a Zoom room.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But it's too late now. I can never go back. Literally, they kicked me out of the state. I can never go back.
Wait, what?
No. I'm not wanted. Just can't go back.
What do you think you have to do in Michigan to get kicked out?
Exist. Be outspoken. Pretty much.
No.
Jokes. I love Michigan, you guys. I'm from there. I love it.
Well, this feels like we have to sidebar on this one, and I need to hear the full story of this.
Yeah. Can you offer any advice? You said you had a little diversity of experience in the room, and this is your first room. So I know from personal experience that conversations in the room don't always go a way that we want them to. There's some people disagree, and I'm always awkwardly in the middle going, can we all be friends? And I just want to know, as a showrunner, especially your first time, you're a manager, essentially. You're managing everyone, not just the writers, but the crew and the directing. What are those awkward moments like where you feel maybe slight tension, and how do you broach them to make sure everyone is reminded that we are here for the same common goal and purpose?
Sure. I love that. And I love the way that you phrased that and saying that. That was wonderful. Because I think often that type of question gets asked, what do you do when someone does this or someone does that? As opposed to, what do you do in these awkward moments? And nobody likes to be the fun police. No one wants to be like, actually, we shouldn't say that. It's not fun. But I do think what is a little bit easier is when you make sure the room knows that this is an opportunity to learn. If you get called out, for lack of a better word, that is an opportunity for growth. And so, it's something that we did in my sketch group in college that I brought to this room is, if one person thinks it's offensive, we do something else. There's always another joke. It's not that hard. So just knowing if I bring it up, I don't have to argue I don't have to sit there and say like, no, well, here's why, I might have an opportunity to explain it, but I don't need to. And that meant that people could just text me and say like, hey, this is making this storyline or this joke or something making me uncomfortable. And I was happy to be the wet blanket instead of making them, even say that. Or that I do feel like people also felt comfortable saying like, hey, I don't love that. I don't know that we want to do that. We might, I know this wasn't the intention, but I think we're kind of accidentally saying this or that. So there were still plenty of awkward moments that I handled to varying degrees of success. I'm not going to say this like solved all the world's problems, but I do think just by saying like, if one person's uncomfortable, that means 1/14 of our audience is uncomfortable. So let's just move on. Let's just move on. It's not on the person who's uncomfortable, and it's not on the person who made the joke to defend themselves, because we know that they didn't, mean anything. Like, I've made a million off-color jokes that, I wish I hadn't. And being able to be like, oh, I made that mistake. Oh, I'm sorry. I totally didn't realize. Thanks for explaining that to me, is just a much easier way to be able to move forward. So that was what we tried to do in our room. And I think it's like, yeah, it's just, I really wanted to make everyone feel heard in the room. All the assistants wrote an episode, everyone got to produce their episode, be in editing, be involved so that they could learn and gain the experience so that they can take my job, And so I just wanted to make sure people were comfortable taking advantage of what I hoped would be an opportunity.
That's such an awesome answer, because it's like you have the accountability and you, first of all, you have the open lane for people to express themselves, which is so rare. And then you have the accountability where we're all kind of keeping each other in check, but then you offer the grace. And I think that's the third step that's missing in a lot of rooms. I notice is that grace to allow people to make mistakes, and we just move on and we forgive, like, okay, so you didn't know that this was probably an offensive thing, or this is made me, it hurt me, and that's fine. We're going to move on. We're apologizing and we're done. That's awesome.
Yeah. People gave me a lot of grace in the room. Like I said, I make mistakes, and usually it's just out of ignorance, and then, and you don't make it again, and so people were very gracious, and I'm super grateful for that in the room. It was just a nice group of people. So that helps too.
that helps, right? That's testament to your hiring. Then, you hired the right people when
that was the priority. Again, like for everyone, there's so many talented people. Why not hire the nice ones?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even if it means you have to teach them a little bit, like, and take some grace with them because they don't have the experience. At least they're nice, because you can't teach that. That's unteachable.
Believe me, I'll try.
Teaching grown people how to be nice. Well, that's a labor I won't take. I only have one question left, because this has been really great. I can go on forever. But it's a question we ask everyone on the show, and it's, what advice would you give your younger writer self? And I'm going to caveat that by saying it doesn't have to be like 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It can be a month ago, yesterday, like
Oh, I love that. Okay. Well, I have an easy answer, but then I also want to think on, I was given some great advice when I was a younger writer. I worked for Ed Solomon, who's a great screenwriter. I was his assistant for like 3 years, and he would say, write what brings you joy. And so that really clicked in for me. And he said that to me when I was like really having trouble, and because he was very generous with, kind of mentoring me and stuff. And I think that makes so much sense. And it really helps, because no matter what you're doing, even if it's an assignment, you have to find your avenue into it. You have to find the way that only you could tell that story, because otherwise I guarantee that if you just chase like the commercial elements and you try, like, I can't watch horror movies. I get way too scared. I watched Poltergeist when I was 8, and I just can't do it. I will Wikipedia them so I can know what happens, and then I'll scare myself on Wikipedia.
I only write horror, so this is
I'll read a horror script, but like in broad daylight. This is actually a great example. So if I were to be like, well, horror is what sells, and I write horror, I'm not gonna do nearly as good a job as you. I'm gonna write something really hacky and, not special. Whereas you're probably coming in with, like, even when we were talking before about the movie you're working on now, it's like, that's something I wouldn't have thought of. It's so clever. It's, it's so unique. And so you're going to bring your voice and write what brings you joy and do a fantastic job that I could never do. And so, I think that once I kind of got that and stopped trying to like write bro buddy comedy, because I thought that's what would sell, it made a lot more sense. And I was able to find that no matter what show I was working on, even if it wasn't my show, I would find the thing that brought me joy and the story within that story that I really was excited about telling. And it's just made life easier and more fun. So that was advice I did get, but now I'm trying to think. I think I'm such a people pleaser. Like, you can't please everyone. So I would say that's advice I could be giving myself all the time.
I know, but it's so true, because I've written things for other people that were hard to write because I just didn't enjoy. I'm just not enjoying writing them. And there's no better freedom writing things that you want to write, because then, most of the job becomes writing things that other people want you to write. So.
And that's the thing. You can always find that, iCarly was a bit of a gimme, because it's about a, creative white brunette with who's like, really good at her job, but not always the best at her life. So that was kind of easy for me to identify with. Yeah. But I also felt like I had to find that when I was pitching on the show, and finding that with Miranda, I had to find what about it really locked in for me, as opposed to just like, oh, like that's a character who looks like me. That's a character who has a kind of similar job to me. Like, what about it brought me joy? And I think that that's where, you know, some of our really fun episodes come in, as the writers coming in and saying like, I'd love to tell this story through the iCarly lens. Like, wouldn't that be cool? And that's where I think we've had some success creatively.
Well, I think they picked the perfect person, just judging off of our short conversation and your personality. I'm like, you are exactly the type of showrunner I would imagine be doing an iCarly show.
Thank you. Wow,
and
that's very kind.
Well, I mean, no wonder it's a huge success. Like, even before the revival, the people in my generation, millennials and Gen Zs, keeping our iCarly alive on Twitter with memes and tweets. And it's always been this like social media, just iconic status show. And it's continuing to be. So.
I think we must have the most memeable cast. Just everything they do. I'm just like, oh, I want to tweet that little eye roll. I want to tweet that. I want to post that. Right. They're so funny just in the tiniest little gestures and stuff that they do. They're so talented.
And also kudos to you for taking that meme of Miranda and translating it to her as an adult. It's like you're in on the commentary too, which is smart. Like, you're taking account of the audience and what they want, because that was flawless.
I mean, but that's a great example of, you know, what stories we wanted to tell. Miranda and Esther, who's a consulting producer, came to the room and said, like, do you know that Miranda there was a Vulture article about this, like the most memeable face on the internet. And this was before, you know, our current cast has given her a run for her money. And so they were like, could we do something with that? And then Nasser came in and pitched this whole idea. And then we had also wanted to do a brother-sister story. So we were like, how can we have that emotion? And it just like, it really came together so collaboratively, but it came from that kernel of, this is something Miranda lived, where, you know, she's got memes of her as a little kid when you're way too high at McDonald's. At one point there was a draft where Nasser referenced that. It was great.
It's wonderful. It's such a fun show, and it's streaming currently on Paramount, y'all. So please go watch it. And Monica's episodes, please go find them as well, because she's amazing. Everyone, though, is an amazing director. The directing is phenomenal. The writing is sensational. The cast is so talented. So what a way to kick off your first show running show.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
And it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. And I can't wait to see the rest of the show, and good luck on the rest of shooting as well.
Thank you. Wow, this was lovely. Let's do this every morning.
Yeah. Okay. Let's push to a little later though. It's earlier.
Oh yeah, you're in Hawaii. So okay, yeah, we can do it in the afternoon next time.
Thank you so much, Allie.
Thank you.
Thanks to Allie Schouten for coming on the show, and to Sharday Sellers for killing it as guest host.
And as always, thanks to you, our listeners. If you liked this episode, leave us a review, and if you haven't already, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. For news about future episodes and more, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter @Final Draft Inc. and Instagram @Final Draft Screenwriting. This episode was produced by Kayla Guess with help from associate producer Emma Vranich. Music by T. Kelly. Thanks again, everyone. Until next time, right on.